sounds incredibly strange that two countries currently hell-bent on wiping each other off the map used to be the absolute best of friends. Yes, we are talking about Iran and Israel. This wasn't just some casual friendship. Their leaders used to meet in secret, exchange gifts, and sign massive classified agreements. Their bond was legendary. Welcome to another video from Voxen TV. If you love stories like this, hit that subscribe button. It's the easiest way to keep us bringing you more. But the most mind-blowing part of all, the very nuclear program that Israel and the US are so fiercely protesting today, was originally gifted to Iran by Israel and the United States. But how exactly did this happen? At what point did Iran and Israel become such close allies? Who was jealous of this relationship? Why did the Ayatollah's regime still buy weapons from Israel? And what was the exact breaking point that turned this deep friendship into a bitter, endless rivalry? To understand the roots of this friendship, we have to rewind to a time when the Middle East looked completely different. This region was previously ruled by the Ottoman Empire, which collapsed in 1922 after World War I. The British took control, and Arab nationalism began to surge. The Arabs had just broken free from the Ottomans and desperately wanted to carve out their own independent nation. In fact, one of the main reasons the Ottoman Empire lost World War I was because the Arabs secretly allied with the British on the promise that they would be allowed to form their own independent countries after the war. But aside from the British and the Arabs, there was one major power in the region that had a massive problem with Arab nationalism, and that was Iran. At that time, Iran was a powerful nation, and its people generally looked down on the Arabs. The Shah of Iran believed that if all the Arab nations united, they would become a massive threat to his country. First, it would divide Iran's dominance over the Persian Gulf, especially since the Arabs had already started calling it the Arabian Gulf. Second, Iran was a majority Shia Muslim country, while the Arabs were predominantly Sunni Muslim. Even though both are Muslim, history shows there has always been a quiet rivalry between them over who truly represents Islam. The Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, was terrified that the influence of Sunni Muslims might spread into Iran and ultimately strip him of his throne. But little did isolated Iran know, it was about to find the perfect ally. Then came the historic year of 1948, when the State of Israel was officially established following a United Nations declaration. The moment Israel was created, neighboring Arab countries felt it was a massive injustice to the Palestinians and immediately attacked Israel. While this war threatened Israel's very existence, the Shah of Iran secretly saw it as the perfect distraction to keep the Arabs off his back. The reality was that Iran didn't actually have a problem with the State of Israel. Its real issue was the growing power of the Arab nation. So while the Arabs were busy fighting Israel for Palestinian rights, Iran quietly leaned toward Israel. On the flip side, Israel quickly realized that being completely surrounded by hostile Arab neighbors meant it desperately needed non-Arab friends. This led Israel's first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, to create a strategic policy known as the doctrine of the periphery. His logic was simple. Since Israel is a tiny state surrounded by Arab enemies, we need to make alliances with the neighbors of our enemy. And looking at the map, the biggest and most important non-Arab neighbor was Iran. This exact Israeli policy laid the very first foundation of the Iran-Israel friendship. The first major result of Ben-Gurion's policy happened in 1950. After Turkey, Iran became the second Muslim-majority country to give Israel de facto recognition. Through the Swiss government, Iran sent a formal letter to Israel, not only accepting them but offering a hand of friendship. This wasn't an official de jure recognition. It was an open secret. The world thought Iran didn't recognize Israel, but in reality, the Shah allowed Israel to open a massive mission in Tehran. It operated exactly like an embassy, but there was no Israeli flag outside, and the word embassy was nowhere to be found. Everyone knew what it was, but officially it was called the Israeli Trade Office. Before we look at how exactly they helped each other, let's understand why the Shah of Iran, leading a Muslim country, sided with Israel. There were three massive reasons. First, the Shah wanted to solidify his monarchy and transform Iran into a modern, powerful industrial state. To do that, he desperately needed advanced technology and intelligence, which Israel could easily provide. Second, the Shah was terrified of Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser, who was aggressively waving the flag of Arab nationalism. The Shah feared Iran might be Nasser's next target, which forced him to lean heavily on Israel for security. But the biggest reason was the Shah's incredibly close ties with the United States. In 1953, Iran's Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh tried to strip the Shah of his powers. But the CIA stepped in, orchestrated a coup, and saved the Shah's throne. After that, the Shah was deeply indebted to America and never wanted to go against their wishes. And America heavily pushed for Iran and Israel to be best friends. The Shah was so terrified of his own people revolting that he created a brutal secret police force called Savak. Their job was to hunt down and eliminate anyone who spoke out against the Shah. And you will be shocked to know that Israel's intelligence agency, the Mossad, was specifically tasked with training Savak. The Mossad taught them exactly how to spy on their citizens and conduct extreme interrogation. Intelligence sharing between Savak and Mossad became a daily routine. Together, these two agencies aggressively targeted communist movements and Arab militant groups. It didn't stop there. Iranian Air Force pilots were regularly sent to Israel for advanced training. Israel supplied Iran with cutting-edge weapons and military technology that the Arab world couldn't even dream of at the time. The two countries even collaborated on missile technology and signed agreements to research nuclear weapons. Yes, the very Iranian nuclear program that America and Israel are trying to destroy today was actually started with their direct help. In 1957, U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower launched the Atoms for Peace program to give nuclear technology to American allies for cheap electricity. The U.S. gave Iran its first nuclear research reactor in 1967, which was installed at Tehran University. The craziest part is that it was Israel who actually trained the Iranian nuclear scientists, the very same scientists who are being systematically targeted and assassinated today. But this friendship wasn't just built on military power. Economics was its strongest pillar. Israel desperately needed oil, and the Arab nations had completely boycotted them. Iran, being Israel's best friend, had massive amounts of oil, but there was no safe way to get it to Israel. If Iranian oil tankers tried to sail from the Persian Gulf through the Red Sea and the Suez Canal, they would be stopped because Egypt controlled the canal and stood firmly with the Arabs. The land route was also blocked because Iraq, Syria, and Jordan stood between them. It seemed impossible. So, to honor their friendship, they built a massive, highly classified pipeline. Israel has a port on the Gulf of Aqaba called Eilat. They laid a pipeline stretching all the way from Eilat to the Ashkelon port on the Mediterranean Sea. This allowed Iranian oil tankers to leave Harg Island, bypass the Suez Canal entirely, and secretly unload their oil at the Israeli port of Eilat. From there, it was pumped to Ashkelon. This secret pipeline didn't just give Israel the oil it desperately needed. It gave Iran a direct route to sell its oil to Europe without having to deal with the Suez Canal. This pipeline was the ultimate symbol of their brotherhood. They split it 50-50, jointly funding the massive project to completely shatter the Arab oil monopoly. This friendship was so tight that the Shah and Israeli Prime Minister Ben-Gurion used to hold top-secret meetings. When Ben-Gurion landed at the Tehran airport, he would literally wear a wig to sneak past the media. By the 1970s, the Israeli trade mission in Tehran was booming with Israeli engineers, doctors, and military advisors. Israel even taught Iranian farmers advanced irrigation techniques, and there were direct flights between the two countries. This was the absolute golden era of their friendship. During this time, the Shah threw the most expensive and extravagant party in human history. October 26, 1971, marked the Shah's 52nd birthday and the 2,500-year anniversary of the Persian Empire. He literally built an entire mini-city in the middle of the desert, complete with a massive private runway, spending over $100 million. Kings, queens, presidents, and prime ministers from all over the world were invited, and food was flown in on private jets from the famous Maxim's restaurant in Paris. To keep their alliance a secret, the Israeli prime minister was not officially invited. But behind the scenes, Israel's Mossad worked directly with the Shah's security team to plan the entire security grid for the party to ensure no one was attacked. Even without an official invitation, their friendship remained rock solid for several more years. But the day finally came when this legendary friendship turned into a bitter rivalry. In the 1979 Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Khomeini completely overthrew the Shah and turned Iran into an Islamic republic. The moment Khomeini took power, he declared Israel the ultimate enemy of Islam and called the Shah a traitor. Just weeks later, protesters stormed the Israeli trade mission and raised the Palestinian flag over the building. That exact same day, Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat flew into Tehran, and Khomeini proudly announced that the building was no longer the Israeli embassy. It was now the Palestinian embassy. This was the exact moment the historic friendship officially ended, but it wasn't buried just yet. After the Islamic Revolution, the story took one final, incredibly bizarre twist. Just a year later, the brutal Iran-Iraq war broke out. Iran was suddenly desperate for weapons, and pure necessity brought the two old friends back together one last time. Behind closed doors, Israel stepped in and secretly supplied massive amounts of weapons to Iran. The war, fought under Khomeini's leadership, raged on for 8 brutal years, and Israeli weapons kept secretly flowing into Iran the entire time. Why? Because Israel wanted to use Iran to completely exhaust and weaken their shared Arab neighbor, Iraq. After the revolution, Iran completely dismantled everything the Shah had built: the Savak secret police, the secret oil pipeline, and the Israeli trade mission. But there was one massive gift from Israel and the US that Khomeini decided to keep open: the Iranian nuclear program. When the Iran-Iraq war finally ended in the 1990s, Israel suddenly realized that the real threat was no longer Iraq. The terrifying reality was that Iran's massive nuclear program was now entirely in the hands of radical Islamic revolutionaries. From that moment on, a dark, brutal shadow war began between the two nations. A war that is still raging across the Middle East today. And that was the exact point where the legendary friendship between Iran and Israel was buried forever. Thanks for watching Voxen TV. If this story was worth your time, drop a like and hit subscribe. It genuinely helps us grow. See you in the next one.